Good evening, Ram 55 here, and I'm back with my next installment of the Kerbal Space Program NASA missions. Now tonight we're going to be launching Echo 1. It was the first passive satellite used for communication launched by the United States. Now in my last video I did the launch of the Pioneer 5, which was sent out to explore and investigate the interplanetary space and do a flyby of Eve. And the next mission in the launch sequence, according to NASA, is Echo 1. Now, unfortunately, due to the way the planets are aligned in the Kerbal Space Program, there wasn't a launch window at the right time to get the launches in sequence. So I ended up doing the Echo mission before the Pioneer 5. So I'll play them back, though, in the proper order as they were done in NASA. Now, one other thing to note is that Explorer 3 had its orbit decay pretty quickly, and it has subsequently fallen out of the orbit around Kerbal. So it has been removed from the game. Now, Project Echo was a passive communication satellite, and you can see from this picture here, it was essentially a massive metallized inflated balloon with a 100-foot diameter radius. It was launched on the top of a Thor Delta rocket that you just saw briefly from Cape Canaveral on the 12th of August 1960. Echo paved the way for instantaneous global communication that we just take for granted today, and it provided the first voice communication from a satellite. The first voice bounced off the satellite. The honors went to President Eisenhower, who had pre-recorded a message, and that message read, "This is one of the more significant steps in the United States program of space research and exploration being carried forward for peaceful purposes. The satellite balloon which has reflected these words may be used freely by any nation for similar experiments in its own interests." Now, Echo was a giant leap forward in the NASA space program, and it allowed the first coast-to-coast phone calls to be placed, which we take for granted today. It also transmitted the first picture via a satellite, and it was a picture of President Eisenhower. And in addition to the communication purposes, it was useful in measuring the atmospheric density and solar pressures. Remember, solar wind is affecting everything out in space, and this is a giant balloon, so it was being blown by the solar pressures, and they could actually measure that kind of stuff. Now, I took the original orbital parameters for Echo 1 and then applied my 70% rule because the atmosphere of Kerbal is about 70% that of Earth, and came up with an orbit of 106 by 117 kilometers. And so that's what I was targeting for my launch. Now, the orbit of Echo eventually decayed, and it re-entered the atmosphere on May 24th, 1968. And here you see my version of the rocket and the satellite sitting up on top. It's pretty simple rocket. Again, I'm not using fancy things like asparagus staging and stuff like that. There's the first stage. So pretty simple rocketry. Second stage is the one that will get it up into orbit and stabilize and hit the correct parameters. You can see some batteries at the top, some solar cells, as well as the Kerbal engineering system. Payload is this right here. Now, obviously, we don't have the capabilities in Kerbal space program to generate a huge balloon type thing, so I wanted to make something that was kind of sort of round. It kind of gave you the impression of what Echo may have been done within the parameters of Kerbal space program. So basically, there's a unmanned command module in the center, and I put some steel plates around the outside and then attached some struts to that. And on the end of the struts are those umbrella-shaped antennas. And when those are deployed, when you look at it from certain angles, it kind of looks round. But anyways, that was my version of the satellite. And it's sitting on top of my version of the Thor Delta rocket. So here we are out on the pad. So the engineers have moved it out, ready for launch. They've fueled the rocket up. And at T-minus 60 seconds, they will activate the SAS system. And so it's on internal guidance. And at T-minus 30 seconds, they put the throttles up to 100%, getting ready for liftoff. So the flight director says everything's in the green, everything's go, we are ready for launch, and we are just ready for the final countdown. And here we go, the launch of the Echo 1 satellite. Now after liftoff, the spacecraft is rotated to 47 degrees. And that's just to align it for the proper inclination once it gets out into orbit. MECO, or main engine cutoff, occurs at 1 minute and 8 seconds into the flight. Then we'll drop that stage down. Now in reality, this aircraft would start its gravity turn the spacecraft would start its gravity turn pretty quickly. But in Kerbal Space Program, from what I've heard from other gurus like Scott Manley and other people, you should wait till about 10,000 meters before you start that turn, just so you can save some fuel. As it is right now, when I drop that launch off, other than the rotation of the Earth, we're going straight up, and that first stage is going to drop right down on the pad. So there's nobody out there sweeping the pad up after the launch. Coming up on MECO, there we go, drop the stage off. We are now on the second stage, and that will propel us up into our orbit. Now when we get to 10,000 meters, we'll start our gravity turn. And because we rotated the aircraft, we're no longer heading east-west on the Kerbal equator. We're actually inclined for an orbit of inclination orbit of 47 degrees. So now passing through 9,000 meters, and at 10,000 meters we'll begin our gravity turn. And there we go. Trying to do it kind of gradually. Pulling the nose over to an angle of about 45 degrees. And we will maintain that attitude until our apoapse hits about 106 to 110,000 meters. You can see the Kerbal Space Program disappearing below us. Curvature of the Earth, the darkness of the sky up at this altitude. I absolutely love this game. And actually I can't wait to get into the manned missions, which will be coming up pretty soon, and then going off into my own development of the space program as I would do it right now. I'm just going to maintain my program with the NASA missions, and hope you guys enjoy it. So we switch over to the map mode, and you can see our path there, that blue arc, the peak of which is called the apoapse, and I'm waiting for that to get to about 106 to 110,000 meters. You can do that by double-clicking on that little node on the blue arc, or I can also use the Kerbal engineering system in the top left corner and looking at apoapse, and when it gets to the right amount, we have secondary engine cutoff, and now I'm establishing a new maneuver node, and as you all know, you put the maneuver node at your apoapse, and then you drag the prograde vector, and that will give you the correct burn to establish the orbit you want. So you can just imagine the Kerbal engineers are back calculating the correct angle and duration of the burn to get to the orbit required for orbital insertion. Now the new versions of Kerbal Space Program, since it's been updated a little while ago, have those little red buttons to the left of the nav ball down at the bottom. Those are pretty handy for aligning the spacecraft up to different markers on the nav ball. Right now I'm hitting the one that was aligning me with the blue marker, which is the marker that points me in the correct direction for the burn. But the one I like to use after I've established that attitude is called the Stability Assist button. As I start my burn, at the very end of the burn, that blue marker actually starts going off in wild directions as the thing is updated and tries to fine-tune your direction to establish the orbit. And when you do that, I think it throws the trajectory of the rocket off. So I just use the stability assist button, and that will maintain that attitude all the way through the burn. So you can see the Kerbal engineers and scientists have calculated an insertion burn of about 40 seconds. And again, what we want to do is divide that turn on equal sides of our maneuver node. So we want to burn about 20 seconds before to about 20 seconds afterwards, and that will establish us pretty close to the orbit that we want. Now, once again, the target orbit is 106 by 107 kilometers around Kerbal. So we fire up the engine again, and I'm looking at a couple things. I'm looking at that yellow arc on the right side of the nav ball, countdown for the time for the burn, but I'm also looking at the Kerbal engineering system in the top left and making sure that my orbit is in the parameters, using the information there for apoaps and periaps for the orbit that I want to establish. Now, as you can see, I overshot just a little bit. So the orbit's a little bit higher than I would like. So I'm going to delete the maneuver node. Look at the parameters on the different nodes that I have, the periaps and apoaps, which is the blue arc. So I'm in orbit, but I'm a little bit higher than what I want to be. So basically, I'm just going to adjust this manually. I'm going to hit the button for the retrograde marker, and that will automatically spin my spacecraft around to align myself up so it's going backwards through its orbit. And then I will just, at low thrust, adjust my orbit down so that I hit the proper parameters for this orbit. So there I am, burning slowly, killing it when it gets to about 107 17 kilometers. And now I'm using the buttons again to align the rocket with the prograde vector. And you can see it happens pretty quickly. Obviously, in the real world, these rockets are big and they'd be rather ponderous and they'd move rather slowly. But here in this program, when you use those nodes, they get over there pretty quickly. And once we're aligned, I will separate the satellite from the booster. And there we go. Now I've got these programmed to an action group, so I hit 1 and that will deploy those antennas just to give it kind of a ball type roundish appearance. And there we are. The Echo 1 satellite is established in orbit around Kerbal. Not really a balloon, not really a sphere, but when you look at it from different angles, yeah, it looks kind of round. So now we go back to the booster that got us established into orbit. We don't want that out in orbit just as more debris and stuff out there, so we want to deorbit that. And what I'm going to do is I put a command and control item on that so I can control it even though it doesn't have the satellite on it. I'm going to align it backwards, basically using the retrograde button, and then use the remaining fuel to burn backwards, which slows us down and deorbits us from around Kerbal, so we don't have as much garbage basically floating around out there in space. Now it's coming down on the dark side of the planet. And I would like to have had it come down on the water, but not everything goes as planned. And I remember as a kid, we would be playing outside late at night, and you would look up on a regular basis on a clear evening, and you could see the bright star of Echo as it streaked across the sky. It went pretty quickly, but it stayed in view for a few minutes, and it was very easy to see with the naked eye. It was pretty cool to think that, from Earth as a kid, with your eyeballs, you could look up and see a satellite established out in orbit around Earth. So here's our booster burning up on re-entry. In reality, this thing would probably destroy itself before any chunks of it would hit the ground, but that doesn't work that way in the Kerbal space program. So even though it was on fire as it re-entered, it doesn't get destroyed until it impacts the ground. We have one less item circulating around the space of Kerbal. And there's our orbit, Echo being the inside one, and we have 2 more satellites in orbit as well. Just looking at the parameters of the orbit, and you can see that just by using the separation of the booster from the satellite, it actually, that little kick changed the orbit of the satellite. Not a big deal. So we watch Moon slip behind the horizon of Kerbal. Good night, Moon. And as we do that, we have a new dawn of communication for the folks of Kerbal. Kerbal sunrise illuminating Echo 1. So there you have it, the launch of Echo 1, the Kerbal's equivalent of Echo 1 into orbit. Hope you appreciated that and enjoyed it. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you wish, please subscribe to the channel and leave your comments so I can continue to make better videos. So I do appreciate your feedback. For my next mission, we finally get into manned or Kerbalized rockets. And keep the pointy end forward as always. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.